Hello and welcome to yet another video on Warhammer 3. Today we're going to be going over the Khorne roster. Now, a couple of disclaimers here, in fact way more disclaimers than you probably need. I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as possible. Now, we didn't actually get to play as Khorne, so I haven't actually used any of these units myself, so all recommendations here are based on my speculation pretty much from the stat sheets. That in mind, I also don't really have the best footage of these or any other units, since we could only play the battle and not view replays, so me trying to get the shots and also not lose the game resulted in me getting distracted by having so much fun. It also resulted in me getting not many shots of these units in action. It was hard enough getting the ones on my side, getting the ones on the enemy side was even more difficult. Also, this is early access, so all things are of course subject to change in the coming months until Warhammer 3 comes out. Also, the devs told us all units were heavily squished up for this battle to make it possible to complete, so if stats like health seem really low, then it's likely due to that. And finally, this isn't the full roster, but all the units I could find in my 4 hours with the game in this survival battle. The full roster will surely be larger than this whenever it may be revealed, and I'll of course cover everything that I've missed as soon as I can. Now, with all that being said, let's get into the roster, starting with the Mila Infantry. First up, we have the Bloodletters of Khorne. Now, these are a demon of Khorne, and this basically means that they work like vampire units, so when their leadership breaks, instead of rooting, they begin to fall apart and take damage, and when they shatter, they disintegrate, and instead of just falling to the ground, they actually burn up like demons, which looks real cool. They're also armor-piercing anti-infantry units with magical attacks and the Hellblade ability. Now, they seem to be a mid-game demon infantry that'll do a lot of damage but also take quite a bit. If they're going against something that doesn't have a lot of damage, then they should start to do pretty well. And if in 2 elites, and they will melt quite quickly, especially if magical damage is involved. They really do great damage with magical attacks, so resistances are no problem to them, and they also get buffs to their damage upon reaching 8 kills due to that Hellblade ability. I would say taking 2 to 4 of these guys either as the middle of your front lines or as some utility Mila Infantry, since they are also semi-fast. And I get the feeling that Khorne will have a lot more Mila Infantry than usual, so be prepared to field more than you used to. They also come in another variation, Exalted Bloodletters. They are pretty much the same, only getting a little damage, and I swear they had flaming attacks, but the stat card isn't showing it, so I could be wrong. Probably just replace any regular Bloodletters with these lads, since they have more damage. Next up, we have the Chaos Warriors of Khorne. They are armoured and shielded and have frenzy. They are your classic tanky infantry, and because they're Khorne, they're of course doing plenty of damage. They have great melee attack and defense, so will be both outputting massive amounts of damage and be able to take plenty too. They have passable weapon damage, but anything with too much armour will mean they will start to struggle. The leadership is also quite high, so it'll take a while for them to turn tail. I would say taking 4 to 6 of these guys, depending on the other options available. You might also have to make the choice between taking these guys and Bloodletters, so you'll have to choose damage or tankiness. They also come in 2 other variations, the Halberdiers and the Dual Weapons. The Halberdiers gain armor-piercing anti-large damage, but lose the shield and a little bit of melee stats. Dual Weapons are again quite similar to the base unit, but drop the shield for dual axes, which gives them a large uptick in damage at the cost of some defense. They also gain a bonus when fighting infantry, so will make for some quality mid-game chaff shredders. I'd say taking 2 of the halberds to man the flanks and absorb any cav charges, and then 4 of the dual weapons for the middle of the front lines would work quite nicely. Now we come to the cavalry units. First up, we have the Blood Crushers of Khorne. They are armored demons of Khorne and have armor-piercing, anti-infantry, magical attacks. That is a lot of adjectives. They also have the Hellblade ability, so once they get 80 kills, they will get some buffs to their damage. They are basically the Bloodletters on those massive badass juggernauts that we saw in the trailers. They have massive amounts of armor as well as some physical and magical resist, so are super duper tough to take down, even with all forms of damage in your arsenal. They are a hybrid cav unit if you ask me, because they have pretty good charge bonus but also decent melee stats and weapon damage, meaning you want to keep them charging and leave them in to stew if it's safe. I would say taking 2 to 4 of these guys, depending on your level of micro confidence, would work very, very nicely. They also kind of come in another variation, Skull Crushers of Khorne. They are kind of like Blood Crushers, but with Warriors of Khorne armed with shields and spears, rather than Bloodletters riding the Juggernauts. They have massive amounts of armor and a shield, so can be super difficult to take out. They also have a huge amount of charge bonus, as well as some meaty weapon damage and melee attack, so will do some serious damage both in the initial impact and if they decide to stick around. Again, I would say 2 to 4 of these, depending on your micro levels, and replace any Blood Crushers. Now we come to the monsters. First up, we have the Chaos Warhounds. They are extremely fast, have scaly skin, and are weak against armor. If you haven't noticed, they seem to be pretty much exactly the same as the ones that we have in game now, so want to be used pretty much the same. Use that speed to get around the enemy lines and tear their ranged units to bits. Come back around and chase off any retreating units, and you're gold. I'd say taking 3 to 6 of these guys, depending on other units available at the time. I do really love these guys in the early game already, so I can't wait to love them all over again. Next up, we have the Chaos Furies, brackets Khorne, so I'm assuming that we also have brackets Nurgle and Siege and all the other demon lords. Anyway, they are a demon of Khorne, are exceptionally fast, and come with Vanguard deployment. Of course, because they're flying, they're extremely fast and also have relatively high damage, but really quite squishy. So we'll probably want to be a backlines blitz attacker like Vargeist or the current Harpies. They have no armor, but some physical and magical resists, so they should be okay as long as it isn't too much damage. The damage is respectable, but the melee defense skill is absolutely shite, so you best hope they kill whatever it is they're hitting fast, otherwise they're going to feel the hurt. I would say taking 2 to 4 of them for some backlines blitz attacks would probably work quite well, especially if you send them around in pairs or more. Next up we have the Spawn of Khorne, which does rhyme. They are unbreakable and have rampage, no armor or resistances, but have quite a bit of health and unbreakable to make up for it, so they will fight to the bitter end. They have a great amount of damage even if it isn't majorly armor piercing, and also their melee attack stats are pretty top tier. These guys seem to be very slightly tweaked Chaos Spawn from the game that we have now, so you want to use them pretty much the same as that. Embed them in the melee lines and they'll do just fine. I would say taking 4 to them as a secondary unit to embed in your front lines, just like they are now. And our final monster unit is the Bloodthirster. This is of course the giant demon of Khorne with massive amounts of armor piercing, anti-large damage. It causes terror because of course it does, and of course it can fly. These guys are seriously scary, and I bet when they get even more health outside of this survival battle, they will be even more horrific. Some people have been calling them Chaos Minotaurs, but they are Minotaurs that can fly and deal dummy-thick amounts of magical, fire, armor-piercing damage with a bonus versus large, and they're also packed into a tanky AF single-entity demon. They can also fly, so are extremely fast, so can be anywhere you need them anytime you want. They're also quite small, so range spam doesn't work quite as well as normal, although it still does work. 2 of these guys would work wonders for some air superiority and backlines obliteration. The one artillery unit we saw in this battle was the Skull Cannon of Khorne. These guys are incredible. They are armoured demons of Khorne and deal armour-piercing anti-infantry damage in melee and range, which is incredible. They also have the Gore Feast ability, which allow them to regenerate whilst in melee, and the Skull Feast, which allows them to regenerate ammo for 5 seconds every 20 seconds, which is little bananas. They are an incredibly high damage, high range cannon artillery unit, so they do need some good line of sight to hit their targets. This does huge armor piercing, magical and fire damage, and can just keep making more ammo, so take it down while you can. That may not be too easy though, since they are basically built like tanks with huge armor and resistances, along with some decent speed and damage, which makes into an artillery and single entity chariot hybrid. Finally, a way for the game to get me into chariots. No matter what it's doing, it's causing pain, and I cannot wait to use it. I would say 2 to maybe 4 of these guys, depending on other artillery options, but this guy looks like a literal tank, so bring them for guaranteed pain on the enemy's side. Now of course we come to the Lords and Heroes. Unfortunately there was just one of each, but nevertheless we'll cover them here. So the Lord that we saw was an Exalted Bloodthirster. These are basically just giant versions of the Bloodthirster monsters that we've just met. They also don't have any attributes, which is a little bit strange, so I'll have to kind of make it up. They are clearly armoured and deal massive amounts of armour piercing, along with having magical and fire attacks, and of course causing terror because, you know, look at the thing. They also have several abilities. They have Bloodthirst, which buffs their own charge bonus, speed and charge speed, Deathbringer, which buffs their own weapon damage, both base and armor piercing, so it will hit seriously hard, and Bellow of Fury, which is a breath ability that does some chunky explosive damage. These lads look like they're leading a whole new class of Lord. We thought tree men were bad enough, now with these guys, it's basically a tree man that can fly and is also a demon. I don't think they'll have 20,000 health in the full game, since they are a literal boss fight here, but judging by the high armor and multitude of resistances, they must be seriously tanky either way. They're also a bit large, so vulnerable to ranged fire, but are also fast and flying, so can just dip, dive and dodge your way to bloody glory. Their insanely high weapon damage and melee attack stats mean they will dish out an ungodly amount of damage, and due to their size this is in an area, so single entities and blobs beware. The one hero unit that we saw was the Blood Reaper. They are demons of Khorne and deal armor piercing anti-infantry damage, and of course have the Hellblade ability. They also come with the Locus of Wrath ability that buffs allied melee attack by 40 in a 40 meter area of effect. That's pretty crazy. They're pretty much a single entity blood crusher with a gargantuan amounts of damage, both when charging and in sustained combat, with insane weapon damage and top tier melee stats, especially for their small size. They seem to be the opposing force for Patriarchs, and they look like they belong on the front lines, buffing allies and picking up the odd few kills for themselves. And that concludes all the Khorne units that I could find in this survival battle of Kislev versus Khorne, of course, in the Realms of Chaos. And if you thought I was finished with the Warhammer 3 coverage, you are mistaken. Tomorrow we have a video coming on the lore of ice magic, going over all those spells, and of course the brand new Winds of Magic system that we are seeing in Warhammer 3, so be very excited and subscribe if you want to see that. I know I do. Thank you so very much for watching, I do appreciate it, and also thank you to all supporters of the channel, in particular Kobe Said So, Nifty Norm, you guys, I keep saying it, you're absolutely crazy to support me, the Unclean Ones tier, I can't thank you enough. One more thank you for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.